Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series, reading Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Oliver Twist as read by Lord Naren White. There was a table drawn up before the window, at which Mr. Brownlow was seated reading. When he saw Oliver, he pushed the book away from him, and told him to come near the table and sit down. Oliver complied, marveling, where the people could be found to rest such a great number of books as seemed to be written to make the world wiser, which is still a marvel to more experienced people than Oliver Twist every day of their lives. "There are a good many books, are there not, my boy?" said Mr. Brownlow, observing the curiosity with which Oliver surveyed the shelves that reached from the floor to the ceiling. "A great number, sir," replied Oliver. "I never saw so many." "You shall read them if you behave well," said the old gentleman kindly. "And you will like that. Better than looking at the outsides, that is, some cases, because there are books of which the backs and covers are by far the best parts." "I suppose they are those heavy ones, sir," said Oliver, pointing to some large quartos with a good deal of gliding about the binding. "Not always those," said the old gentleman, patting Oliver on the head, and smiling as he did so. There are other equally heavy ones, though much of a smaller size. How should you like to grow up a clever man and write books, eh?" "I think I would rather read them, sir," replied Oliver. "What, wouldn't you like to be a book writer?" said the old gentleman. Oliver considered a little while, and at last said he should think it would be a much better thing to be a bookseller, upon which the old gentleman laughed heartily, and declared he had said a very good thing, which Oliver felt glad to have done, though he by no means knew what it was. "Well, well," said the old gentleman, composing his features, "don't be afraid. We won't make an author of you, while there's not an honest trade to be learnt, or brick-making to turn to." "Thank you, sir," said Oliver. At the earnest manner of his reply, the old gentleman laughed again, and said something about a curious instinct, which Oliver, not understanding, paid no very great attention to. "Now," said Mr. Brownlow, speaking if possible in a kinder, but at the same time in a much more serious manner, than Oliver had ever known him assume yet, "I want you to pay great attention, my boy, to what I am going to say. I shall talk to you without any reserve, because I am sure you are well able to understand me, as many older persons would be." "Oh, don't tell me you are going to send me away, sir, pray," exclaimed Oliver, alarmed at the serious tone of the old gentleman's commencement. "Don't turn me out of doors to wander in the streets again. Let me stay here, and be a servant. Don't send me back to the wretched place I came from. Have mercy upon a poor boy, sir." "My dear child," said the old gentleman, moved by the warmth of Oliver's sudden appeal, "you need not be afraid of my deserting you unless you give me cause." "I never will, sir," interposed Oliver. "I hope not," rejoined the old gentleman. "I do not think you ever will. I have been deceived before in the objects whom I have endeavored to benefit, but I feel strongly disposed to trust you, nevertheless, and I am more interested in your behalf than I can well account for, even to myself. The persons on whom I have bestowed my dearest love lie deep in their graves, but although the happiness and delight of my life lie buried there too, I have not made a coffin of my heart, and sealed it up forever on my best affections. Deep affliction has but strengthened and refined them." As the old gentleman said this in a low voice, more to himself than to his companion, and as he remained silent for a short time afterwards, Oliver sat quite still. "Well, well," said the old gentleman at length in a more cheerful tone, "I only say this because you have a young heart, And knowing that I have suffered great pain and sorrow, you will become more careful, perhaps, not to wound me again. You say you are an orphan, without a friend in the world. All the inquiries I have been able to make confirm the statement. Let me hear your story, where you come from, who brought you up, and how you got into the company in which I found you. Speak the truth, and you shall not be friendless where I live.
Oliver's sobs checked his utterance for some minutes. When he was on the point of beginning to relate how he had been brought up at the farm and carried to the workhouse by Mr. Bumble, a peculiarly impatient little double knock was heard at the street door, and the servant running upstairs announced Mr. Grimwig.
"Is he coming up?" inquired Mr. Brownlow. "Yes, sir," replied the servant. "He asked if there were any muffins in the house, and when I told him yes, he said he had to come to tea."
Mr. Brownlow smiled and, turning to Oliver, said that Mr. Grimwig was an old friend of his, and he must not mind his being a little rough in his manners, for he was a worthy creature at bottom, as he had reason to know.
"Shall I go downstairs, sir?"
inquired Oliver.
"No,"
replied Mr. Brownlow.
"I would rather you remained here."
At this moment there walked into the room, supporting himself by a thick stick, a stout old gentleman, rather lame in one leg, who was dressed in a blue coat, striped waistcoat, nankeen breeches and gaiters, and a broad-brimmed white hat, with the sides turned up with green. A very small plaited shirt frill stuck out from his waistcoat, and a very long steel watch chain, with nothing but a key at the end, dangled loosely below it. The ends of his white neckerchief were twisted into a ball about the size of an orange. The variety of shapes into which his countenance was twisted defied description. He had a manner of screwing his head on one side when he spoke, and of looking out of the corners of his eyes at the same time, which irresistibly reminded the beholder of a parrot. In this attitude he fixed himself, the moment he made his appearance, and holding out a small piece of orange peel at arm's length, exclaimed in a growling, discontented voice,
"Look here! Do you see this? Isn't it a most wonderful and extraordinary thing, that I can't call at a man's house, but I find a piece of this poor surgeon's friend on the staircase? I've been lamed with orange peel once, and I know orange peel will be my death, or I'll be content to eat my own head, sir."
This was the handsome offer with which Mr. Grimwood backed and confirmed nearly every assertion he made, and it was the more singular in his case, because, even admitting for the sake of argument the possibility of scientific improvements being brought to pass which will enable a gentleman to eat his own head in the event of his being so disposed, Mr. Grimwig's head was particularly a large one, that the most sanguine man alive could hardly entertain of being able to powder through it at a sitting, to put entirely out of question a very thick coating of powder.
"I'll eat my head, sir,"
repeated Mr. Grimwig, striking his stick upon the ground.
"Hallo, what's that?"
looking at Oliver, and retreating a pace or two.
"This is young Oliver Twist, whom we were speaking about,"
said Mr. Brownlow. Oliver bowed.
"You don't mean to say that that's the boy who had the fever, I hope?"
said Mr. Grimwig, recoiling a little more.
"Wait a minute. Don't speak. Stop,"
continued Mr. Grimwig, abruptly losing all dread of the fever in his triumph at the discovery.
"That's the boy who had the orange. If that's not the boy, sir, who had the orange and threw his bit of peel up upon the staircase, I'll eat my head and his too." No, he has not had one," said Mr. Brownlow, laughing. "Come, put down your hat, and speak to my young friend."
And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like,
comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.